And I'm delighted to now be joined by former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Scott, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good day, Mike. It's good to be here and with so many Australian colleagues who are here with me also
Yes.
over these last few days. It's been terrific.
Yeah, it's been an interesting event, hasn't it? Because many people have been there to sort of talk about the way that the world is right now, the way that it needs to be sort of shaped, perhaps, to deal with all the various challenges. I mean, the most pressing one at the moment, of course, is the situation in the Middle East.
Sorry, I've just missed that last part, Mike.
Yeah, I'm saying the biggest challenge at the moment, I suppose, facing world leaders is the situation in the Middle East.
Of course. And that's very top of mind and very present in our own thinking. In fact, just in the last few days, while I've been here, former Prime Ministers Abbott and Howard are here as well, but the 6 former living Prime Ministers, bar one, issued a very strong statement in relation to support for Israel and the situation in the Middle East and thinking of all the devastating loss of life and what we're seeing there and hopeful for a more positive outcome. But right now it's a very difficult time. But you're right. I think ARC is really providing a good place for many issues to be raised. I mean, the coverage of issues here has been quite extraordinary. It's been everything from world peace to childcare. And I think that's terrific because it does demonstrate that there are so many different elements and strands and streams that people of goodwill have to address in order, as they say here, for a better story and to make the world a better place. And I think that's what's drawn the interest of so many from so many different perspectives.
Yes, and the letter that you guys have written talks about the condemning of the hatred being spread by Hamas. Is your letter
yes.
One of those which backs what other people have said in various different political circles, a ceasefire situation, or do you understand Israel's need not to do that?
No, it doesn't call for that. What it calls for is that Israel will do everything it can within its own efforts to ensure that it minimises as far as humanly possible the suffering that is undoubtedly taking place. But this is a very egregious thing that has occurred in the Middle East, and Israel has the right to defend itself, but needs to do so obviously within the bounds which they full well know.
Yeah.
And so we look forward to them to doing that, and we pray that they'll be able to achieve that. It is a highly distressing situation, and sadly one that has seen in our own country the rise of anti-Semitic protests and targeting of Jewish people in Australia, which is abhorrent beyond belief in a country such as Australia.
Well, I did want to ask you about that because I've been really quite shocked by the reaction in different countries in the world, in Australia for one, also in Britain as well, in the United States and in other parts of Europe. Have you been as surprised as I have at the way that some elements of the communities in our countries have behaved?
Yes. I mean, but I wouldn't pretend to think, particularly in Australia, I can't speak for other places like here, not being from here, but I wouldn't pretend for a second that that's a widespread view within Australia, not at all, quite the contrary. Of course, everything I think in Australia is very concerned about the situation and the terrible suffering that's taking place. But overwhelmingly, Australians would have no part in the sort of anti-Semitic behaviour which is seen to, justify the atrocities that were committed by Hamas. And we have to continue to remember that that's what initiated this. These were terrorist atrocities. And in my own statement to the Parliament at the time, I said, I think we have to be careful of even calling it a war, because war and describing it in those terms somehow could justify or seek to justify the other combatant. Well, there could be no justification for the terrorism exhibited by Hamas, and that must be wiped.
And why do you think that, apart from Mr. Paul Keating, you were all able to sign this, but he wasn't? What was his reasoning? Did he give a reason why he didn't sign the letter?
Oh, look, that's up to Paul. I mean, it's not a caucus, former prime ministers. People are free to join or not join as they saw fit. And so, I respect Paul's decision. That's a matter for him. Others felt very strongly. I mean, and across both sides of the political fence and across different generations too. And I think that hopefully has provided a great deal of comfort to Jewish people in Australia, and I hope around the world, that there is that strong expression of support and empathy and prayers for a peace that will come. I think it's also important, and I am pleased to see that this is now getting some attention, that there is thought going into then what next, and how is the situation of peace and stability and hospitals and schools and proper states being able to function in Gaza, and indeed the West Bank and other places. We all believe in a two-state solution, but you need an effective other state. I mean, that's what the people of Gaza need. They need an effective state where people are more interested in running hospitals and schools than they are building rockets and advancing terror on those on the other side of the border. And so to go back to your earlier question, no, it wasn't a call for a ceasefire. And I was a bit disappointed, frankly, that the Australian government didn't stand with Israel and United Nations on that motion recently. I mean, that's up to them to make those decisions. They're the government now. But at a time when I think it's important, where countries have historically, like Australia, stood with Israel, then we must continue to do so now.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with you. Scott, thank you very much indeed. Scott Morrison there, former Prime Minister of Australia.